Section 2, the basics. So here we're going to try and cover off the basics for layout and page components. So things that you've already probably seen in NetBeans, as well as kind of like where they might go on the page. So let's start off with layouts. So layout is the way that we place things on a screen. It generally falls into 5 or 4 major categories depending on how you look at it. You've got the header, and this is just an area where we generally keep things like the title of the page and some primary navigation, which we'll get onto soon. You then might have some sub-navigation for that page, which is anything that relates to the content on that page. The content itself. Content, when we talk about content in this lecture, what we'll be looking at is images, text, videos, anything that can be placed on that page that helps users to either get information from it or indeed input information into the system. And finally, the footer. This is generally the kind of the boilerplate stuff. So things like terms and conditions or about us or indeed help might be there if the user interface isn't intuitive enough. So they're the major chunks, and we like to call them chunks, of an interface. So to keep it as simple as possible, we generally have these 4 areas that we kind of try to use. The basic components. So, as you all may be aware of your swing controls and NetBeans, today we're going to look at labels, radio buttons, checkboxes, combo boxes, text fields, password fields, and that's it. So let's move on to labels really quickly. So what I'll do is I'll give you a quick brief overview of what they're meant to do. Labels, for example, help you to identify page elements. They differentiate these chunks of content. So, for example, if I have an area which is called, let's say, my account, and under that I have another area called my password details, or under that my personal details, under that my address details. These clear labels allow me to quickly scan a page and figure out what I want to be inputting on. Keep it short and simple. The shorter the label is, the easier it is to read, the faster it is for the user to read. But make sure it describes what it's trying to do. We have this little KISS acronym, which is keep it short and simple, or indeed some people call it keep it short stupid. Here's an example of multiple labels. So you can kind of see what they're trying to do, but we'll move on to good examples and bad examples of this later. Next we have radio buttons. So they're usually used if only one selection is required from a group of options. Indeed, they're presented in a group, yes, no, maybe, for example, and we always have a default value. So in the idea of yes, no, maybe, we might default at yes. The user will select no, and then it moves from yes to no. Here you can see how it's being used. Checkboxes. So the great thing about checkboxes is it clearly displays all options that are available to a user to input. They can select more than one, unlike a radio option or a radio button where you can only select one. It can get quite cluttered with checkboxes, so we have to be careful with how many we use on a page, and we also must consider the layout or positioning of them on the page. So for example here, you can see that there's quite a lot going on. And this could be quite overwhelming for a user as well, so we do have to take this into consideration. But not to worry, don't worry, because we have its good friend, the combo box. The combo box is also used to display a large number of options available. Indeed, things like countries or languages. Just like checkboxes, it allows you to select more than one option, and the user has to click to view those options in the first place. So this is important. So here you can see a typical drop-down box. So what are the differences? Well, a combo box usually facilitates greater than 5 options. Checkboxes are usually best when there's only about 3 to 5, and you can use them for more definitely, but there's a general rule of thumb we try to go with something like that. The The combo box takes up less space on your interface, and indeed we'll get onto how important space is too. Again, we have to lay these out vertically, i.e. one on top of the other, in order to create best use of space. And it does take up a little bit more space than a combo box generally does. It requires a click to see the options, and this is quite important as well, because it does mean that the user has to interact with your interface to understand what there is to do next. And this is somewhat alleviated when you can actually see the options right there in front of you with radio or with checkboxes. So text fields. Text fields are great at allowing users to type something in, which is what they're used for. A user can input any value into a text field. It's always important to remember to validate that format. So if you're taking in an email address, please make sure that it has an @ sign and a dot something at the end of it. There's a lot of code out there that should help you to do that. Indeed, if it's a telephone number, it's important to make sure that the user enters a number and not alpha or any letters of the alphabet or anything similar to that. You get what you need to get. Provide an example is also quite good as well. So if it's a name or named textbook, a name input field or text field, put in an example name, example John or Jane if it's a first name, for a surname O'Grady, O'Donoghue. This just helps or gives the user an idea of what they should be doing next. So in this example you can kind of see what we're trying to get at. Password fields. These are the cousins of the text field. So it's an input field that hides what the user types. This is very important when it comes to security and the user's personal details. And they should be used when they need to be. It allows the users to type something securely, which is very important these days. Always has been. And indeed, validate the format. Make sure it's a strong password. It has capital letters and alphanumeric or anything like that. That brings us on to section 3, some design principles.